Hello everyone, welcome back to the Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. Today we're going to be taking a look at quite a few different headlamps. We have actually 9 different headlamps on the table today, and we're going to be comparing them and trying to determine which one is right for you and all of your outdoor adventures. While this review should be good for a lot of different needs for headlamps, I primarily have this geared for hunters. One of my main criteria of all these headlamps that I was going to choose for this video is that they had to have a red or green function. For myself, I spend a lot of time hunting and I have to have a red or green light on it, not only to help me preserve my night vision, but also to help eliminate the possibility of spooking game. And so all of these headlamps had to be under $60 and they had to have a red, green, blue function, something like that. Now my personal favorite is green. All of these have red, some of them have red and green, some of them have red, green, and blue. Now this entire video is going to be divided up in different chapters or different categories, and we're going to look at each of these headlamps within those different categories. And I'm going to put chapter markers down below. You should be able to find them somewhere around the video depending on what device you're on. You may even be able to find them on the progress bar of the video. And so feel free to find the categories that interest you the most. What we're going to do to start off this video is we're going to introduce you to each of the models as well as give you the price for those different models. Now the first one up on the table today is the cheap Amazon light. At least that's what I'm going to call it. It does have a name, but it's hard to pronounce. I always forget what it is, and so I'm just going to call it the cheap Amazon light. If you want to know what model this is, there'll be a link down in the description for all of these different headlamps. This is going to be the cheapest on the table. Last time I checked, it was $20, but for a 2-pack. When I purchased this a few months ago, it was actually $14 for a 2-pack, and I've also seen it on other websites like AliExpress for a very, very inexpensive price. Next up on the table is this light. It's called the Everbright light. This also came from Amazon, and I paid about $20 for this light. Next up is going to be the Nebo Micro. Now you can see I'm holding this without a strap, but there is a strap here. This light does have a hat clip or a strap. Keep in mind that everything I tell you about this headlamp today is going to be about the Mossy Oak edition. There are several different versions of the Nebo Micro. There's, I think, a red edition and a couple of other things, but they do have different specs and different features. So just be aware that I am talking specifically about the Nebo Micro Mossy Oak edition, and this light comes in at $35. Next up is the hybrid light. This light also has a hat clip as well as the strap, and this light comes in at $40. This is actually a light I've been using for a while now. Next up on the table is the Fenix HM50R, and this headlamp costs $60. Now this headlamp is one of the ones that was sent to me for review, so thank you Fenix for sending this out. If I don't mention it, then I purchased these with my own money. There are 2 here that I did receive from the manufacturer. Next up on the table is the Petzl Area 2. This also is a $60 headlamp. And then we have its little brother, which is the Petzl Area 1. This is also the other headlamp that I received from the manufacturer. The Area 2 I purchased on my own, and the Area 1 I received from the manufacturer. This headlamp cost $40. Next up we have the Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB. Again, this is a $60 headlamp. And finally on the table we have the Black Diamond Storm 450. Once again, a $60 headlamp. All right, so now that we've introduced you to all the models, let's talk about size and weight. The cheap Amazon light weighs 2.5 ounces. The Everbright light weighs 3.4 ounces, but it does have this flashing or solid little red light that people could see you from behind, and you can remove that locator light and bring the weight down to 3.1 ounces. The Nebo Micro Mossy Oak edition comes with both a strap and a hat clip. If you use the strap, it weighs 1.5 ounces, being one of the lightest on this table, and 1 ounce with the hat clip. The hybrid light weighs 1.7 with its strap and just 0.9 ounces with the hat clip. I want to point out that the Nebo Micro is a little bit lighter with the strap, but the hybrid light is a little bit lighter with the hat clip. Both of these, though, are the lightest here of this comparison. The Fenix HM50R weighs 2.7 ounces with its strap, and while it doesn't have a hat clip, it does have a way to remove the light and have like a pocket clip, and if you just use the clip, it's 1.9 ounces. The Petzl Area 1 and 2 weigh 3.7 ounces. The Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB weighs 3.3 ounces, and the Black Diamond Storm weighs 3.1 ounces. Now, if size and weight are your primary concern, then the Nebo Micro and the hybrid light are probably going to be some of your top picks. The Nebo Micro definitely wins for a compact headlamp. Keep watching for some of the ways that maybe there's some shortcomings with this light, but it's definitely the most compact, and it's right there for one of the lightest headlamps as well. The hybrid light does just barely beat it out with the hat clip, but it's a little bit heavier with the strap. So whatever you think there. But again, For size, the Nebo Micro wins. I think for size, the HM50R from Phoenix is also going to be a really good option. It's a little bit different form factor, but I feel like it is a fairly compact light. As far as bulky, you know, the Petzl Area series to me feels fairly bulky. The Everbright light definitely is bulky. The Viz 550 and the cheap Amazon light it's there kind of similar. They're sort of bulky, but a little bit less than some of these others. And then again, the Black Diamond Storm, I'd say it kind of falls right there in the middle. It's not the most bulky, but certainly not the most streamlined and most compact either. Next up, let's talk about batteries, battery charging, and battery status indicators. First up, the cheapy Amazon light. The cheapy Amazon light does have a rechargeable battery, and it's rechargeable with a micro USB. As far as a battery status indicator, if you turn it on this side, you are going to see 4 blue LEDs that's going to give you a status of your battery. Next up is the Everbright light. It also has a rechargeable battery, rechargeable with micro USB, and it also has 4 blue LEDs that are going to give you the status level of that rechargeable battery. The Nebo Micro also has a rechargeable battery that's rechargeable by micro USB. However, I did not see any way to have a status indicator of the battery on the Nebo Micro. You're seeing a pattern here. The hybrid light also is rechargeable by micro USB, but it does not have any status indicator on the hybrid light. Now, the last rechargeable light of this group is the Phoenix HM50R, but there is a change. This is rechargeable by USB-C, which I really, really like. It does have a status indicator for the battery, and it's right here on the side where the button is. You press it one time, and you're going to see a green light flash. Now, the Petzl Area series is a bit unique because it does take 3 AAA batteries. However, they do have a battery called their core battery. It costs, if I remember correctly, about $30, and that battery is rechargeable, and it would just replace the 3 AAA batteries in your headlamp. Now, that battery is rechargeable, I believe, by micro USB, and it plugs directly into the side of the battery. You would have to take it out of the headlamp and plug directly into the battery. Now, this headlamp does have a battery status indicator. When you first turn the light on, you're going to see a little green light up in the corner. After your headlamp is on for a while and you turn it off, you're again going to get that little green light. That is your battery status indicator. Again, green indicating a fairly full battery, but it would also turn orange or red to indicate the different levels of your battery. And that would be the case for both of these Petzl Areas. Now, the Viz 550 does use AAA batteries, and as far as I can tell, there's no battery status indicator. Now, the Black Diamond Storm 450 also uses 3 AAA batteries. However, it is called their dual fuel headlamp, and there's others in this series as well, but it's kind of like the Petzl in that you can buy a rechargeable battery. Again, Black Diamond's rechargeable battery costs about $30, and that would be in addition to the cost of the headlamp, but you could use either the AAA's or their rechargeable battery. Now, the thing that I didn't like about Black Diamond's battery, which costs $30, is that you can't just plug it in with a cord just like you can with the Petzl core battery. You actually need a little charging station for that battery, which is just another thing to bring along with you when you go out into the woods. But one thing I did want to make you aware of is that this headlamp costs about $60. You add that $30 battery and you're at $90. There is another model of this which I didn't review because it was out of that $60 price range, but it is the Black Diamond Storm 500R. This is the Storm 450, that's the 500R. And it will pretty much have the same features except the 500 would indicate a little bit brighter brightness to it, and the R would indicate that it has a rechargeable battery. Now, keep in mind, it's not something you can take out and replace with the AAA, so if you need that functionality, that would not be the right headlamp for you. But the 500R, if you're willing to spend a little bit more, is actually cheaper. I think it's $75. It's actually cheaper than buying this headlamp and then adding on the rechargeable battery. And the battery capacity of the R is greater than the battery that you would get to put in the 450. So just be aware of that. Now, as far as the battery status indicator, it has 3 blue LEDs on the bottom. Just be aware that it's 3, not 4. However, there is a difference here in that the lights can be solid or flashing. And so you could have 2 solid and the 3rd flashing, and that would give you an indication of what level you're at. Or it could be just 2 solid, or it could be 1 solid and 1 flashing, or it could be 1 solid, or as it is right now, just the first one is flashing. And you're going to get that indication both when you turn it on and when you turn it off. In this case, oh, I'm sorry, 1 is on. 1 is not flashing, but 1 is on. I used this headlamp also for tracking a deer over the weekend, and so that's why that one's about out of juice, but that one has the battery status indicator on the bottom. Now, speaking of batteries, let's talk about battery life. Now, I really wanted to do some extensive testing on battery life and see which one really performed the best. However, there's so many variables of different battery types. You've got rechargeables and then what kind of AAAs you put in, that really the battery life was going to be very difficult to test. And there's different brightnesses as well. You know, do you try to find an equal brightness, or do you only use the brightest setting of each headlamp? It's very difficult to test. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to put up on screen the manufacturer's advertised battery life for each of these headlamps. Now let's talk about the waterproof rating of each of these headlamps. The cheap Amazon light, as you might expect, is not rated as high as some of the other more expensive lights, although it is rated at IPX4. Now IPX4 is simply a splash rating. It's not for submersion. It's not for, like, heavy getting soaked in rain. It's a simple light splash rating. Now, to be honest with you, I question whether that's actually true from a cheap, presumably Chinese-made headlamp. It just doesn't feel very waterproof. It feels very cheaply made, but I'll just take their word for it. Now, the Everbright light, I could not find any information about its waterproof rating, but I would suspect that it would be similar or equal to, maybe even better than the cheap Amazon light, just from looking and feeling that way. But because I couldn't find any information on it, I'm going to assume that it has none. The Nebo Micro also is rated at IPX4, which again is just a splash rating. It's not really a waterproof rating. Now the hybrid light, you might notice that on the back side here there's an exposed charging port. That would imply to me that this has absolutely no waterproof resistance or water resistance whatsoever. Now when you get to this side of the table, pretty much everything has a really great waterproof rating. The Phoenix has an IP68 rating, which is a dust and waterproof rating. That means it's actually able to be down at underwater for 30 minutes down to 1.5 meters below the surface of the water. That's really great. Now, everything else on the table here, the Petzl areas, the Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB, and the Black Diamond Storm are all rated to IP67. Now, IP67 is very similar to IP68. IP68 just means that it meets or exceeds the IP67 rating. So what you're going to see is that the Phoenix is rated to be down 1.5 meters below the surface of the water, while the Petzls, the Princeton Tech, and the Black Diamond Storm are all rated to just 1 meter below the surface of the water. So Phoenix went a little bit above there with an extra 0.5 meter, and we're able to get that IP68 rating. All the rest still have the same dust and waterproof rating. That means they can be underwater, completely submerged for 30 minutes at a depth of 1 meter. Next up, let's talk about lockout mode. And what is lockout mode? Well, it's simply a switch or a function that keeps the headlamp from being turned on in your backpack or your pocket and accidentally draining your battery. Now, the cheap Amazon light, the Everbright light, and the Nebo Micro do not have any lockout modes that I'm aware of. The hybrid light has this very, very tiny switch on the back of the light, which is the lockout mode. And while it works, boy, you got to have a sharp fingernail or a small screwdriver or something to get in there and flip that switch over. It can be a challenge there. I got it. Flip it back, and that's going to be your lockout mode. Next up, the Phoenix HM50R does have a lockout mode, and you do it by pressing the button here on this end, and you press and hold it for about 3 seconds. The white light's going to come on, and then you're going to see the red light flash a couple of times. That would indicate that you're in lockout mode. If I tap the button quickly, the red light's going to flash, and then it's going to go off. Nothing's going to happen. Want to get out of lockout mode, I would press and hold that for about 4 seconds. It's going to flash again, and this time the red light's actually going to stay on. Just press and hold briefly, and you're going to get that light to go off. Now, the Petzl Area Series has a lockout. You do that by just pressing and holding the button. And you're going to see that little status light up in the corner flash. Now, if I press the button, the status light flashes, but nothing happens. Again, press and hold. And now I'm back on, and I'm out of that lockout mode. On the Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB, you press and hold the button for 5 seconds in order to put it in the lockout mode, and you're going to see those red LEDs light up. Now, to get it out, you have to press and hold for 5 seconds again, and when you see the LEDs light up a second time, then you're going to be out of lockout mode. And finally, the Black Diamond Storm 450, I think, has the best lockout mode system because it actually involves 2 different buttons. You're going to have to press and hold both of the buttons on the top, and after a few seconds, you're going to see that flashing light that indicates that you are in lockout mode. And if you try to turn it on at this point, all you're going to get is that flashing light. If you press and hold both buttons again, you're going to be back out of that lockout mode. You see the white light flash that tells you you're out, and now you can use your headlamp normally. Now, personally, I think the Black Diamond Storm 450 does have the best lockout system because it does take both buttons. to activate and deactivate that lockout mode, but it's still very easy to use. Now let's talk about functionality of these different headlamps and what the different button functions are and how they actually work. On the cheap Amazon light here, you have 2 buttons on the top, and the right button simply cycles you through your modes. You're going to get bright spotlight, you're going to get the dimmer spotlight, then you're going to get bright flood, dim flood, red, flashing red, and off. And that's pretty much all you get. Now, on the left button here, this has a special feature that I haven't mentioned yet. And that is that the left button puts it into basically hand detect mode, I guess I'll call it. Where you turn it on, your headlamp comes on, but at that point, it turns on and off by waving your hand in front of the light. Now this can be useful maybe if you're a mechanic, maybe if you're gutting a deer, whatever. Your hands are dirty, you don't want to press the button, maybe big gloves, that could be useful. When you press that a second time, you do get floodlight as well, which you can turn on and off with your hand. But you do not get red in that on and off with your hand mode. The ever bright light, on the right hand button, you turn it on, you're going to get bright green, you're going to get red, and off. That's all you get. The left button is going to give you your white modes, and so the white and the colors are on separate switches here. The left button gives you your bright light. I believe that is maybe flood and spot combined, I'm not sure. Then you get just flood, then you get just spot, dimmer spot, and then you get a flashing light and off. Next up, the Nebo Micro. You simply press the button once, just a quick tap to turn it on. It's going to be fairly bright, and then you just go through your various cycles of brightness settings, and then you get the green, and then you get the red. Now, if you want to get to turbo mode, while the light is on, you press and hold, and that gives you the turbo mode. And again, that's very short term. You can't use it for an extended period of time, but that's your turbo mode. Now, when the light is off, and actually the way you turn this off is a single press also, but you just have to be on long enough to where it recognizes you're not trying to change modes and you want to turn it off. All right, there we go. Next up is the hybrid light, and the hybrid light has a single button on the top. It does have this rotating head. So you can press it once and it's going to come on to the last used color. In this case, it was red. You press and hold to change to a different color, green or white. And you press it again, it's going to turn it off. Now, if you want to change the brightness, there's 2 brightness settings for each color. You press it to turn it on, and within a quick succession, press it again, and you're going to get that slightly dimmer. So that's all of the functionality of the hybrid light, and I have found this to be a kind of clunky system to use, especially the amount of time it takes to rotate from the different colors. Next up, the Phoenix HM50R is very simple. It has a single button and pretty easy to understand functionality. You press and hold to turn it on. It's not a long hold, but it's more than just a quick press. Once you're on, you can do a quick press to cycle through the various brightness settings, and to turn it off, press and hold again. Again, it's a short hold, but it's more than a quick tap. Now, if you do want to get to the red mode, you can double tap, and that's going to get you to red mode. That is only possible when the light is off. You double tap to get to the red mode. If you want to turn the red mode off, you do need to press and hold again to get the red mode off. Now, on the Petzl Area series, when you press the button, it's a quick press. It goes on to your last used setting, which is kind of nice. And you can just single press to go through the different brightness settings and the different white modes. And then if you want to press and hold, you can go to your different colors, and you leave off when you get to the one that you want. Single tap, you can also get to a flashing mode on that color, and tap again to get off. Again, tap it back on, you're going to go back to the color. So it does have that memory setting. Want to go off, just tap it, and you're good to go. Now on the Princeton Tech light here, you're going to tap it once, and you're going to go to red every single time. There's no way to go directly to white. When it's on, you press and hold, and that's going to get you to white. Now, one of the interesting things here is if you press and hold, you can actually dim the light, which is really quite nice. It's going to flash at the bottom. Press and hold, you're going to see it flash at the top. That's going to tell you you're at full brightness. Now, if I click again, it's going to go off. Now, let me turn it back on again and show you that this has more than red. Click once, click again, that's green, click again, that's blue, and that's how you get to your different brightness settings. But if you want to get to white, you have to press and hold. Now, one thing I don't particularly like about this system is that if you want white, it's a little bit difficult to get to. Now, the Black Diamond Storm, there's more buttons on this light and a good bit more functionality than some of these other lights. If you push the big button, which is right here, it's going to come on to your last use setting, the last use brightness. Whatever the color it was, whatever brightness is, that's what it's going to get to. Now, if you single tap that button, it's going to go off. Turn it back on, and you have a similar functionality to the Viz 500 or 550 here, and that is if you press and hold, you can dim that light down. You're going to see it flash. That's all the way at the bottom. Press and hold again, and it's going to come all the way up, and this time it's actually even going to flash again. It's going to turn on both the spot and the flood when you get to that full brightness level. And that's really cool, but what's cool about this light that's not the same as the Viz 550 is that you can do that on any color. Now, in order to go to the next color, you would press the small button, or actually in that case it went from that bright light, it went to the floodlight there, I think that is. Press again and then I get to the green. But again, I can press and hold to dim the green. Press and hold to make the green brighter. Hit the small button again and I can cycle through. Now, one thing you're going to notice is when I cycle through, I'm only hitting green. How do I get to red and blue? Well, that's by pressing and holding the small button. You can change your color. And again, I can fade that one up and down as well. Press and hold again, I can get to red, and that fades as well. I can fade that one down or up. Now, if I want to go back to white, I short press the small button, and that gets me back to my white modes. So you've got spotlight, floodlight, red, green, and blue. All of them are able to be dimmed pretty much infinitely throughout that range just by pressing and holding this big button. Now, another functionality that I really like about the Black Diamond Storm 450 here is that if I had dimmed this light all the way down like it is right now, and maybe I'm using it in a situation where I don't need a lot of light, and then all of a sudden I need a bunch of light, I can just tap the side of the headlamp and it's going to instantly give me that full power spotlight, floodlight, everything, and give you a bunch of light. Dim it back down and you go right back to that dim last use setting. Now what's interesting here is if I go over here to my green light or my red light in this case, I can do the exact same thing by tapping. It's going to give me full brightness on red, tap it again, and I'm going to go back to the dimmer setting that I was on. Really, really great features and functionality of the Black Diamond Storm 450. Now, because I use my headlamps a lot for hunting and because I use red and green a lot and I'm trying to preserve night vision, it's really important to me that I be able to go directly from the headlamp being off to red or green or whatever that color is that I want to be able to use. The other thing that's important to me is memory. Will it come back onto the same place that I was last using it? So let's talk about direct to color and memory. The cheap Amazon light, there's no direct to color and there's no memory. You just cycle through the modes. The Everbright light, there's no memory, but you can go direct to color by hitting the right button and you get green and then red. You can't go direct to red, but you can go direct to green because the white is on a separate switch. Next up is the Nebo Micro, and it does have memory. It is going to remember your last use setting when you turn it on, but if you're not sure what your last use setting was, or maybe you know it's white, you want to go direct to color, you press and hold. You're going to get red, hit it again, you're going to get green. Just be aware if you do hit it again, you are going to go to white. The hybrid light does have memory. It's going to come onto your last use color, although not necessarily a memory for brightness. However, it does not have any ability to go direct to color if that was not your last use setting. The Phoenix HM50R does have memory for your last use brightness setting, but it doesn't have memory for your last color. However, because of the way this works, you kind of get into the red mode differently. It doesn't really need that sort of memory. Again, you double tap to get to red, so you do have that direct to red, and it's totally sort of a separate mode from the white mode, so there's really no issue there at all. You can easily get to white with memory for brightness, or you can get to red. The Petzl Area series does have memory. So in other words, if I used red last and I click it, well, red's going to come on. The problem is if you used the mode last that's white, the spot mode or the flood mode, you're not going to be able to go direct to color without going through white first. So while it does have memory, there's really no good direct to color. Now the Princeton Tech headlamp here does not have any memory and it goes direct to color every single time. Now if you're really worried about your night vision, this may be the one for you. However, if you need that bright white light, it can be a little bit frustrating to have to go through color to get to that white light. Finally, the Black Diamond Storm 450. Now this headlamp does have phenomenal memory. This headlamp not only remembers your last use setting, but also the last use brightness level of that setting. Not only that, it also has memory for every single mode in this headlamp. So if you want to have your spotlight super bright and your floodlight super dim, as you cycle between those modes, it will remember your last use brightness setting of those modes. Does it have direct to color? Yes, it does. If you're on white, if that was your last use color, then you would press this button, which is the big button, and it would take you to your last use color, which in this case was white. Turn that off. If you do want to go direct to color though, even when your last use color was white, you would press and hold the small button, and you're going to go to your last use color and that color's brightness setting, which in this case was green. So the Black Diamond Storm has phenomenal memory, and it has great direct to color as well. Next up, let's head outside where I've set up a test where you're going to be able to see and directly compare the different brightness levels and settings of all of these different headlamps. One thing I want to point out is I've locked down my exposure on the camera where it cannot adjust for various light levels. So everything's going to be completely consistent, and you're going to be able to see how far and how wide these different light patterns are going to reach and how they're going to work for you. Okay, let's get the outdoor testing started, and I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can, and you can skip around or pause the video to compare the ones that interest you the most. We're going to go through all the colored modes on these headlamps first, and then we're going to go back through a second time and show you all of the white modes. First up is red mode on the cheap Amazon light. And this light does not have any green or blue, so red is all that you're going to get for colors. This is green on the Everbright light, and then here is red on the Everbright light. This is red on the Nebo Micro, and the reason I'm showing it to you in the camera is because it does not even reach the 10-foot marker when it's on. It does work to light up the back of my camera, but that's pretty much all that it's going to be good for, just seeing things that are very close. Green is a bit more useful in my opinion on the Nebo. As you can see, it does light up the 10-foot sign, but just not nearly as bright as some of these other lights. This is red on the hybrid light, and the flicker that you see here happens on a couple of these different headlamps, and it's happening only because of a frequency issue between the LED light and the frame rate of the camera. It's not something that you're actually going to see with the naked eye. And then here's the lower red mode on the hybrid light, and then this is green on the hybrid light. And while this light does have a flood pattern, this green light is very bright, and I'm seeing a bit of light reaching all the way out to that 100-foot marker. Next up is the Petzl Area 1, and this is red, this is green, and finally this is blue. This is red on the Petzl Area 2, this is green on the Petzl Area 2, and finally this is blue on the Area 2. This is red on the Phoenix light, and again the Phoenix only has red, it does not have blue or green. This is the Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB, and you can see that the colored modes of this light have much more of a spot pattern than most of the other lights. It's going to reach out and light up that 50-foot sign and even get a little bit of reflection off of that 100-foot marker as well. This is the green mode, and finally this is the blue mode. And our last headlamp is the Black Diamond Storm, and you remember that each of these modes can be dimmed down on this headlamp. Here you can see when I dim the red light, it is similar to the Nebo in that it doesn't even light up that 10-foot sign. I appreciate the option to control the light output because having the option to have a really dim light is useful, but I appreciate that I can bring that brightness level up if I actually need it. You can also see that with green and blue, it does just barely hit that 10-foot marker even on its dimmest setting. Now let's move on to the white modes, and with the cheap Amazon light, the first mode you're going to get is spot mode, and for such a cheap light, this headlamp has some impressive brightness. You can see that it really is lighting up that 100-foot marker, but you can also see how well it is lighting up back into the trees. Take note of a couple of boards on the trees back there, those are about 200 feet away. Next you get a slightly dimmer spotlight mode that still reaches the 100-foot mark, but is not lighting up nearly as much beyond that. Then you're going to get a nice wide flood mode, and finally a lower flood mode. On the Everbright light, your first mode is a combination of spot and flood. On this mode, you can see it lights up to the 100-foot sign and is reaching up into the trees, maybe not quite as well as the cheap Amazon light, but really doing quite well. Your next mode is flood mode on the Everbright light, and then after flood mode, you get a spot only mode. And one thing I want to point out here is the ring pattern in the light as I move the headlamp around. It just doesn't have quite the even light pattern as some of the other modes or even some of the other headlamps in this video. In my opinion, the Nebo Micro actually has a really impressive amount of light for such a small headlamp. This is high mode, and I'm going to be showing you turbo in a minute. This is high, and it's reaching out there and lighting up that 100-foot sign nicely. This is medium brightness, and then this is low mode. Now let's check out turbo. Notice how well it lights up back towards that 200-foot marker. Maybe not as bright as some of the headlamps, but I think it's very, very close. Just keep in mind that turbo mode on the Micro can only be used for 30 seconds at a time to prevent overheating and preserve battery life. This is the brightest white setting on the hybrid light. This headlamp only has flood mode, so while it is a nice light for seeing up close, it isn't going to have nearly the reach of many of these other lights. And then here is the low white on the hybrid light. Here is low on the Petzl Area 1. This light has more of a spot pattern. Here's medium, and finally high on the Area 1. You can see it's hitting that 100-foot sign well and reaching back into the trees. Keep in mind, this is the Area 1, and on the Area 2, it's supposed to actually be a little bit brighter, but to be honest, I haven't been able to see a huge difference between the two. Speaking of the Area 2, let's just go to that one next so you can see them side by side. One thing I should point out here is that the Area 1 had a fresh set of batteries, and the Area 2 had been used a little bit, though the battery indicator still showed great battery life. So here is low on the Area 2,
here is medium, and finally here is high, and you can see it reach back into the trees, but to my eyes it looks very similar to the Area 1. The Phoenix light also has a bit of a spot pattern, and it has 4 brightness levels. Here's low, here's medium, here's high, and you can see this mode is already reaching 200 feet into the woods. And finally, the highest setting is also called turbo on this headlamp, and you can see how well it lights up those trees well into the distance. Just for reference, look how bright it appears on camera at closer distances. The Princeton Tech has that dimmable light, so here it is on full brightness, and when we dim it down, you can see it just barely hitting that 50 and 100 foot marker, but as we bring it back up, you can see how it lights up all the way out to 200 feet. On the Black Diamond Storm, you can fade all of the modes, so here's spot mode on its lowest setting, and then let's bring up the brightness, and you can see that it does reach back up to that 200 foot marker, though maybe not quite as bright as a few of the other lights. This is flood mode on the Black Diamond on its lowest setting, and let's bring up the brightness, and you're going to see this is a nice wide light that just isn't going to have a ton of reach.
Next up, I do want to have a quick category here for what I'm calling special functions. These are things that maybe not all the headlamps do, or something that a particular headlamp does that makes it sort of stand out from the others. For the most part, most of these things have probably been covered in other parts of the video, but I do just want to make an opportunity here to cover them all in one place. So as I already mentioned, the Amazon light does have this special functionality where you can turn it on and off by waving your hand. And for a cheap light, that's kind of an interesting feature and quite impressive. Now the Everbright light here does have a couple of interesting features. It has this marker light that can be on the back of your light. Maybe if you're riding bike, walking, hiking, you want people to see you and identify you, this could be a good option. It can be either solid or it can be flashing. Now another interesting thing that I know I haven't pointed out yet in this video is that in the headband here, there's actually a built-in whistle. All right, pretty loud little safety whistle, but there's also, I don't know if you can see it here, there's also a little hook. So if you had a little D-ring in your tent, you wanted to hook this up and hang it from your tent, have a little lantern style thing, that would be possible, and that is unique only to this headlamp. Now, both the Nebo Micro and the Hybrid light, I already mentioned them, they both have hat clips, which makes them kind of stand out from everything else on the table. The Phoenix HM50R, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I did not show you. It does have an ability to remove it from the head strap here, and it has its own little clip. Now, this clip is not a hat clip. If you clipped it on your hat, it'd either be pointing straight down or straight up. Not very effective, but it would be good maybe if you're wearing a backpack and had a sternum strap, you could clip it right on there, or maybe put it on your shirt or jacket. That would be a possibility, or you could just put it in your pocket and use it as a pocket clip. But this is a cool little flashlight on its own right when you take it off the headband, and that does make it unique from all of the other headlamps on the table. Now, if I'm being honest, the Petzl Area series really doesn't have anything special or unique that really speaks to me. Petzl is a great company. They seem like they're quality headlamps. There's just nothing that really stands out to me about them. Now, the Viz 550 RGB, I feel the same way. The only thing that really stands out to me is that it has the ability to fade that light from full brightness to dimness. But really, I think the Black Diamond really outshines the Viz 550 on that, because you can dim not just the white light, but you can dim spotlight, floodlight, red light, green light, blue light, and you can dim all of those. And so I really think that the Black Diamond Storm really stands out on that category. Again, I already mentioned it, but the ability to go from dim to full brightness by the, I think they call it the power tap technology, something like that. That is a really cool feature that makes the Black Diamond stand out as well. All right, well, if you've made it this far through the video, you probably either skipped ahead or you really care about all the details and you're ready for the final conclusions. So I'm going to go through each of these headlamps one final time, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts. First up, the cheapy Amazon light. And you know, I feel pretty mixed emotions on this light. It feels cheaply made. It feels like it's a cheap light. But when I think about the fact that I paid $14 for a 2-pack, right now the prices vary. You might be able to get 20 for a 2-pack. This light actually really impressed me for the price. It's very bright, got a great spotlight on it, got a great floodlight on it, good red. There are some disadvantages like no direct to red, and there's some different things like that. It also has this fancy hand wave feature, you know, it's kind of unique. And it's got a rechargeable battery for that cheap of a price. That's kind of impressive. And you know, for $7 a piece, I could buy, boy, 6 or 8 of them for the price of some of these other ones, of the more expensive ones. You could throw one in your truck, in your purse, and maybe your wife's purse, depending whether you're male or female or whether you carry a purse. You know, throw one in your glove box, throw one in your closet, throw one in your shed, your shop, whatever. I mean, you could have a bunch of these for the same price as one of these more expensive ones. Now, do I think this is going to have the same quality, durability, etc.? Not really. But if you're looking for a cheap headlamp, this actually impressed me a lot more than I expected. On the Everbright light, This lamp, you know, for 20 bucks, again, it impressed me. One of the things I really love is that super bright green light. I mean, I love a really bright green light that, you know, trying to preserve my night vision a little bit, but it is going to give me a good bit of light to see. One of the downsides is there is no, you know, different modes as far as brightness for that green light or that red light. What you get is what you get. So that's a little bit of a downside. It is a little bit clunkier, but again, you're getting a rechargeable light with, you know, a great direct green, a great red light as well. Some really great features. One thing I did notice, if I haven't pointed this out already, is that the white lights tend to have some ring patterns in them. They're not a real nice even light, and that is a downside as well. But again, when you're talking about $20, um, I just don't think you can go wrong with the Everbright light. And you go check it out for yourself on Amazon. It has some really great reviews. The Nebo Micro. I can tell you this is one of the lights out of all these. Some of these are going to be sold after this video, but this is one light that I'm probably going to keep, probably especially for like backpacking and things like that. It's so light. It's so compact that I'm just going to have a hard time getting rid of this light. It's just, I mean, I hate to say it, it's kind of cute. It's got direct to red. It's actually pretty bright for how small it is. It's got that turbo mode, which you can't use it for super long. One of the things, you're probably going to be a little bit limited in battery life just because it's so small and it can only put so big of a battery in this light. Is it the perfect light? If I could only have one, would it be this one? Probably not, but to me, it's going to probably stay in my arsenal. The Nebo Micro Mossy Oak is a pretty cool little light. The hybrid light is a light that I've been using for a little while now, and I kind of liked it until I got a chance to try some of these other great lights. The hybrid light has a couple of shortcomings, and one is, of course, I mentioned there's no waterproofing to it at all. It also has no spot mode, so while the floodlights are pretty bright, there's really no reach to it if that's something that you're interested in. There's also no direct to red if that wasn't your last used color. There's a couple of just real downsides to it. It is a nice light. It's light, fairly light, but at $40, I just think there's some better options. I mean, I like the way this thing angles. There's some cool features, but like I said, I just think there's some better options at this price point. Next up, the Fenix HM50R. And guys, this light is really a great light. I really like it. I think you're going to buy this light if your priority is build quality. This light, the headband feels great. It's all metal construction. It feels really durable and really good. And it does have that highest waterproof and dust rating with that IP68 rating, just by a little bit over the IP67 of these other lights, but it does have that highest rating. It's also very, very, very bright with a caveat. When tracking deer recently, I did notice that after a period of tracking, it seemed like it wasn't as bright. And eventually I realized it wasn't allowing me to use those brightest modes. I'm not sure if it was an issue of maybe overheating or if it's an issue of the battery life decreasing and not having enough output to be able to use those brightest modes. Just be aware that that's going to happen. Chances are it's going to happen in some of these other lights too, but I have experienced it firsthand with this particular light. Again, if you're looking for a robust, really well-built light that's very bright but does lack flood mode, then this light might be right for you. All right, the Petzl Area series, both the 2 and the 1. Obviously the 2 is a little bit brighter, but they're both very similar headlamps. They're made by a reputable manufacturer. The build quality feels good. There's no concerns there. On the other hand, there was nothing about these headlamps that really stood out to me that really made me excited about these headlamps, that I just felt like, man, these are the best on the market. Good build quality, good manufacturer, but just nothing that stands out. You know, if you're looking for good build quality, I think the Fenix stands out a little bit more. The advantage the Petzls would have over the Fenix is that they do have the blue and green colored modes, not just red. Now, for me, the Area 2 at $60, I just would have a hard time justifying that when you get really good build quality in the Fenix or you get really great features in the Black Diamond Storm. I would have a hard time justifying it. Now, if you're thinking between the Petzl Area 1 at $40 or the hybrid light at $40, in that case, I probably would take the Petzl Area 1. Better build quality, some waterproofing to it. You've got red, green, and blue modes. You've just got a little bit better functionality in the Petzl Area 1 over the hybrid light for very similar prices. I would choose the Petzl Area in that situation all day long. But if you're looking at the Area 2 at $60, I just have a hard time justifying that price point. The Princeton Tech Viz 550 RGB, to be honest with you, I feel about the same way as I do the Petzl lights. You know, it's made by a reputable manufacturer, good build quality, it's cool, it's bright. It is lacking a flood mode though, and it's kind of annoying that you have to go through red to get to your white modes, and so it's just not a lot to it. Now, it does have that fading white light, which I really, really like, but if that's the reason you're buying this for $60, why would you just not buy the Black Diamond Storm that has all of that functionality of the fading spotlight, the fading floodlight, fading colors, the power tap technology? all of the different features of the Black Diamond Storm. And so I'm probably already giving it away, but I really love the Black Diamond Storm. If you haven't been able to figure that out through the video, this has absolutely been my favorite light. Now, I came into this pretty unbiased with all these different lights, and when I started testing, it became apparent really quickly that this light was going to be my favorite. While it's not the most compact on the table, it is a much better form factor than something like the Petzl Area series. It's just not a lot smaller, but it is a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact. Um, it just feels good in the hands. The functionality of it, all the different functionality, the memory, the lights on the bottom for the battery, the power tap, being able to cycle through the different colors. Everything about this light is exactly what I would want it to be. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a couple of cons, and probably the biggest cons for me is that this has so much functionality, I find myself forgetting what button to push when to get the function that I want. Is it short press? Is it long press? But keep in mind, I spent the last month or so testing 8 or 9 different headlamps on this table, in addition to some other headlamps that are old that I use from time to time. And so I'm not getting in a habit or a rhythm of using just one headlamp. I think when this becomes, which it probably will, my primary headlamp, then I think I'm going to be more used to it. Now, another con for me is the fact that when you get the rechargeable battery for this, you have to have that separate charger. So ultimately for me, I'm probably eventually going to upgrade this light for less than the addition of the rechargeable battery. I'm probably going to upgrade this light to the Black Diamond Storm 500R. So again, for me, there's no question the Black Diamond Storm 450 is my absolute favorite light, hands down, on this table. I love the functionality, love the feel, love everything about it. But I might upgrade to the 500R eventually. But if you're looking for cheap, Amazon lights over here, Everbright, great. Small, compact, I'd probably go with the Nebo Micro. And if you're looking for build quality and durability, I'd go with the Fenix HM50R. Well, I know this video has been very long. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope the info in this video helped you make an informed buying decision. If it did, please leave a comment down below and let me know what headlamp you're buying with your hard-earned money, and maybe consider giving me a thumbs up or a subscribe. Until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.